Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have to say, we're going to talk about something today that I wrote this down because I love what this guy said. It says, become the hero in your own story. And I absolutely love heroes. I love superheroes. If I was real with you, I'd say I'd probably want to be a superhero, although I don't know what I'd want my superpower to be. But we're going to unpack some stuff today that's going to really, hopefully, help somebody on this podcast today. I'm hanging out with Michael Anthony. He's the author, speaker. He's a coach, and he actually owns a company called Think Unbroken. So, sir, how are you today?
Man, Dave, I'm so good. And I'm right there with you too. Like, I love the idea of being a superhero. I don't know, man. Like, give me all the power.
Right? Yeah, I do. When I do some trainings, I ask people just to kind of lighten the load back when we were able to meet in public. If it was a smaller group, I'd be like, hey, if you could have one super, power, what would it be? And boy, I tell you, it just opened up for a ton of fun conversation. So, so I appreciate you hanging out with us. Tell us a little bit about Think Unbroken and what you got going on over there.
Yeah. So Think Unbroken is a brand that I created that started in this like 3 a.m. thought process.
Okay.
I come from a pretty traumatic background, as many of the people in the world do. And, it's often very much within the nomenclature of society to label people who maybe have mental health ailments or don't quite fit in the status quo or whatever that might be as broken. And I had this moment laying in bed and I was like, that's just not me. That doesn't make sense. That's not how I think. And then I was like, oh, think unbroken. And what had happened, Dave, is I had been trying to figure out how to make sense of this blog that I had been writing for a couple of years. That was from a
Okay.
whole other aspect.
Okay.
And then slowly it turned into coaching, it turned into public speaking, it turned into writing a book and teaching a workshop around the world. And then it turned into sitting here having this conversation with you.
That's awesome. So think unbroken, unpack it for us a little bit. What specific things do you drill down on for entrepreneurs, anybody that you come in contact with?
Yeah, what's really surprising is a lot of my coaching clients are entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And so much of what Think Unbroken is about mindset. And as anyone who is in any type of business industry or an entrepreneur, the biggest thing that we know is like mindset is everything. In fact, I believe that so much it's like the background in my office here. It says mindset is everything. You can't see it, but I can. And I'm constantly thinking about how do we take our understandings of the world of ourself to I believe, and this is my thought, and I'm going to say it's true because it's
Sure.
mine,
Yeah.
is that we are the sum total of all of our experiences leading up till this moment. And
Okay.
if that indeed is true, then that means that all of those experiences have informed us, both the good and the bad. Unfortunately, because of the loop that we often find in when it comes to the bad, we get stuck in that place I call the vortex, right? That's not showing up, that's not living for yourself. And worse, especially if you're an entrepreneur, self sabotage. And so, how do we create a game plan and a roadmap to get you through that? Not to get over it, because I don't know certain things that we ever get over, but
Sure.
can we put them where they go on the shelf, create a game plan, hit the roadmap, get on the path, and then move forward in our life until we ultimately reach whatever those goals are that we have in place for ourselves?
Gotcha. And I was shocked when in prepping for today, and I saw that about 7 out of 10 adults have experienced, a trauma in their life that actually has having a lasting impact. So, a lot of people listening, like you said, in this situation, Michael, they've gone through, some trauma in their life. And I don't know for whoever's listening how you guys handle trauma. I know for me in my past, and I was raised to just kind of brush it away, pretend it didn't happen, put a little flour on it if you need to kind of make it look a little bit better, brush it under the carpet, whatever. It was not, again, in the 70s or so when I was a kid, in the 80s, that wasn't stuff that you talked about a lot. So it feels like there's been a fundamental shift in at least acknowledging, trauma, talking about it, being upfront with it. Are you seeing that movement as well?
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's really fascinating, if you know, if you go back to the 40s, 50s, and the boomer eras, they raised their children exactly how you were raised, exactly how I was raised, to not have those conversations. Because,
Right?
you know, from war times, you had to man up, you had to be strong, you had to, there's no spot for complaining when you're eating spam for dinner because the government's giving you coupons, right?
Yeah,
But that's detrimental, right? And that leads you to this place in life where you have no space to be an emotional creature. And that was my experience very much so for a long time, where I couldn't tap into that. And what I see now is such this movement towards like, at least let's have the conversation.
sure.
And I think that's more important than anything, because effectively, Dave, we're reframing generations of trauma. And that dates back all the way to the dawn of humanity, because realistically, humans were not the nicest people and creatures on planet Earth, right?
Right.
So we've done a lot of damage. And I think the plus side of being willing to step into the conversation means that we can create change. I think one of the most detrimental things in Western societies, especially, is this idea that you should get over the bad things that happen to you. Well, those bad things that happen to you often eat you alive inside. And it's
Sure.
not until you deal with those before you step into being who you are fully capable, able of being.
Wow. Yeah. So we used to joke as kids, or not as kids, but we'd say, "Hey, I wet the bed when I was a kid, so therefore, I got trauma in my life." And I think we as adults try to make light of our trauma as a kid, and so fast forward the tape when you're grown up and you're struggling through some things. If I'm understanding what you're saying, Michael, is that there's times that those are connected, where there's something from your past that's kind of hindering your present or your future. Is that a safe bet to say it that way?
Yeah, I don't think you could say it any more succinctly, Dave. Like, that's spot on. You know, I think about in my early 20s, I was extremely successful in corporate America, and all signs point to that being improbable. And what happened as a proxy byproduct of that is that even though in business I was super successful, the rest of my life was a disaster because I hadn't worked through those things. And this is so common amongst
Yeah,
people who are successful, especially who are successful young, is that they go, "Oh, this is who I am." And the question that I failed to ask for a long time was, is this who I want to be? And so much of the experience about it is, yes, maybe you have to joke about it or maybe you have to put it off, but eventually you're going to have to face it. And
yeah,
that's one of the hardest things about being an adult, is because realistically it impacts everything. Why do you think you get nervous when your boss calls you in the office? Why do you think you freak out if you're 1 minute late? Why do there's so many questions that are all tied into our experiences.
sure.
And I'm not saying it's always bad. It's the same reason you get excited when you walk by a cookie spot and you go, man, that reminds me of grandma's house,
Yeah,
right? But as a whole, you have to understand why you react the way you react.
sure. Yeah, wow. And I just, I want to circle back to one word that you use because we hear it a lot, and that's mindset. You talk about that. For me, I try and learn at a sixth grade education. So for what is for just simplify mindset, because there's so many things that people are thinking when they hear that. So when you say it, Michael, what are you referring to when you use that word mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. Mindset for me is that moment of decision, right? It's within the way that you think about yourself in the world.
Okay.
And for me, mindset is so much about that place where you are evaluating your existence against yourself versus the other people in the world. Because there's always going to be people who want to bring you down or pull you down or be in your way. And to me, mindset is the full understanding of what your capabilities are in this given moment, while also simultaneously allotting yourself the space for potential.
Okay. So I feel like that's where the hero piece comes in, because now all of a sudden I know what my purpose is. I know what my story is. I know what my superpower is, but it takes that time to kind of sit and ponder. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, it's hard to slow down and to count the cost and to kind of work through this. So are there tips or steps, or if somebody's listening, they're like, man, there might have been something going on in my life, something vaguely, is back there. Is there some tips, or what do you normally do at that spot when somebody, thinks there might be some trauma that is affecting their future, but they're not sure?
Yeah, I think the best thing that you can do is step into that space of just having reflection, right? And so often, and this was my experience, so I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but
Sure,
I always kind of knew there was still things that I needed to deal with, right? There was always that little bit on my shoulder, that little whisper right here that said, there's something wrong, right? And it's very scary, Dave. It's
sure.
terrifying
Yeah,
to have to face that reflection and say, wow, okay, I need to like step into assistance. I need guidance. I need help. I need to find whatever that is. And I think it's twofold, right? If you're at the beginning of this and you're like, okay, there's something going on and I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's impacting my life negatively. I see it in my relationships, my friendships with my wife or my husband. I see it at work in the way that I treat my employees, my connections to business partners, whatever that thing is.
sure.
You first have to pause and acknowledge, okay, there's something here. And then you step into this thing called compassion, meaning that in that moment of acknowledgement, you don't judge yourself because often we're not culpable for the things that happen to us in our youth, right? And we take that responsibility on so often that it actually gets in our way.
Sure.
It's not your fault. The things that happen to you in your childhood are not. And so to be gentle with yourself in this way that allows you to remove and displace shame and guilt is excessively important. And if you get to that place as you're in it and you're acknowledging, you're thinking about it, the one piece that I would say is probably more important than everything else is to recognize that leveraging help is so incredibly profound and important because think about this, Dave. Name one person in history who has ever done anything great by themselves. And we are a communal species. We are meant to be in connection with other human beings. And sometimes asking for help doesn't doesn't mean that you're not capable, right? It
Sure.
means that you have gotten to the threshold of what you're capable of accomplishing on your own, and thus you need expertise from someone else to help you go to the next level, right? I think about it like this: if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Sure. Wow. Well, and I think, I mean, leverage help, right? I mean, for some odd reason, I think about a guy like Tiger Woods or a guy like Michael Jordan, from the sports side. And I think for whatever reason, Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods needed coaches. They needed people around them to be able to help them. Maybe Tiger had a blind spot and he couldn't figure out a glitch in his swing, or Michael Jordan had a little glitch in his shot, whatever that is. So regardless of, where you're at in your life, if you're listening, I mean, finding somebody to, come alongside you. We talk about that a lot here because personal growth, as well as business growth, you don't know what you don't know. And so I appreciate you sharing that, Michael, because, there's nothing wrong with leveraging help. And I think it's, there are plenty of macho, I don't need anybody people still in the world. I get it. And if that's the case and that's you and you want to try and do this on your own, you know what? More power to you. I just know that there's an easier way, especially being a business coach myself. I get calls all the time. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. That doesn't mean you're less of a person. It just means you're really awesome. You kick ass in this area over here, but yet you can't see something about your another part of your business. I mean, like you said, nobody's ever gotten successful just by yourself. So, if you're listening, find somebody, call me, call Michael, whatever. But you know what? To do nothing and then not understand why things don't change, I think is the tragedy that I see. So I appreciate you sharing that. One of the reasons that I wanted to get you on the show was specifically what you just said, because I coming at this from a spot of compassion versus a spot of judgment. When we as human beings are confronted with something, you know, I know I do a lot of work with the DISC personality profile, and it's interesting in a group of people. You'll be looking at a list of things that are you're good at, and then some things you're maybe not so good at. It's way easier for most people to look at the list of things they're not so good at. It's really hard to say, boy, Michael, I'm really good at, and then fill in the blank, right? We're so judgmental of ourselves. So you come from the side of compassion. So explain that to the listeners and to me, because that's not really natural. So there was something that, whether you found or something created that. So I'm really interested in that point of view.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And I don't know that it is or is not natural. Perhaps at one point it was, right? To find compassion, to find space in our existence. But going back to what you said a moment ago about like being a macho man trying to man up, things like
Yeah.
that. Let me tell you, I know that firsthand, right? I chased money, cars, clothes, girls, all of the wrong things so that I could be the coolest dude in the room while my life was simultaneously awful. And I think about that person in my 20s and success and like really having this excessive life and recognizing now looking back on that going, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
That wasn't who I wanted to be. It was the lack of compassion that had led me to that place because I was so scared to tap into this idea that I could potentially have the life that I wanted to have. And that life meant self-love, self-belief, trust, honesty, understanding my values and all of these things which
Yeah.
had eluded me for so long that all I was doing, I was on autopilot, right? You go to work, you sit down at the desk, you show up, you get the check at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And then like for me, the problem was success. Like I was just too successful in business. And because of that, like everything else exacerbated. More drugs, more alcohol, more food. At one point, man, I found myself 350 pounds, smoking
Wow.
2 packs of cigarettes a day, sleeping in bed till 11 o'clock in the morning, and watching the CrossFit games. That is rock bottom,
Wow.
right? And I had this moment. I looked at my life. I was like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Recognizing that the number one thing up to that moment that I'd been actually the most successful at was being an asshole to myself.
Sure.
Work harder,
Sure.
go harder, do this, do that, live up to the other expectations of the people around you, not recognizing that at that time, that was a reflection of the experiences of my youth. Thinking about like to be successful in life, it meant that I had to be the opposite of everything everyone that told me I'd ever be. You're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not handsome enough, you're not capable enough, whatever that thing was.
Right.
And when I stepped in this process of looking at life from a different scope, and it really came to fruition, once I started my second legal business, which I want to be clear about, I had some very illegal businesses back in the day, but it was survival. And I had to change my mentality from this is survival, do what it takes,
Sure.
to you are in control of your life. So what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And the thing that I had to step into to recognize that I was going to be on a path to create change in my life was effectively looking at and measuring my life and saying, okay, there are problems here. But the way that you've approached these problems to this point have not created any long-term sustainable or viable change. So let's try the opposite.
Sure.
And the opposite for me at that time was compassion and kindness, but also being relentless, Dave, because I looked at this and I said, there is a problem here. And the problem is my mindset. The problem is the trauma experiences I've had. The problem is the way that I think about the world. So, what do you do with that?
Sure.
And through this place of compassion, it was okay, go to therapy, go to men's group therapy, CBT, EMDR, all of the acronyms, go to personal growth, read Tony Robbins, read Brendan Burchard, Mel Robbins, read Marie Forleo's blog every single day, like do all the things to lead to this place where I could start building myself up. It's really easy to find quote unquote self-belief, self-esteem, self-love and material possessions. But how long is that viable? And from my
Sure.
experience, long term, it's not, because eventually you're going to hit the threshold of when that has fulfillment. And then you're going to find yourself sitting in a pool wondering, okay, what's really happening? What really matters in my life? And in that moment, you make a decision. And if you inform yourself to make that decision based on giving yourself the space of understanding that you don't know everything yet,
No.
then you can step into it with this form of compassion that allows you to not be judgmental or biased to yourself, but instead sit with it and recognize, I don't know how I got to this place, but I know that I don't want to be in this place anymore. So, how do I move forward?
Wow, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm a black and white type person, so I think of, and this is what I'm working on, trying to understand that there's gray areas in life, right? So I think about judge versus compassion, the words that I wrote down, and I think about, if I go all the way to the side of compassion, then I'm going to be in bed until 11 o'clock. I'm going to cut myself so much slack that I'm not even going to be, a productive human being. So that's what goes on in my mind, And so it's like I'm trying to find the middle where, you know what, there are times where you want to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, so to speak, and then there's times that you want to give yourself a get out of jail free card. So are you is that are we is the goal to live somewhere in the middle of that? Do you think, Michael, or what's your thought on that piece?
I actually love that question. That might be one of the best questions anyone's ever asked me. And why I say that is because that was my experience for a long time, Dave.
Okay.
There was no gray area. It
Yep.
was either yes or no. And I do still, to some extent, live a very binary lifestyle. It's very much yes or so, except when it comes to my wants, needs, and interests, the things about me that make me me that I need in order to be sustained, right? And so I think about my life like this. Yes, do I work 14-hour days? Most of the time, sure. But because of the way that I live my life, that is within the what I would call the parameters of acceptability. I
Okay.
have my routine. I don't break that for anyone. I get up, I do yoga, I drink water, I journal, and I read every single day, no matter what.
Sure.
I step into this place of self care, recognizing that I can't serve the world if I am beat down and run down. So if I'm in the middle of a day and I'm like, I have to take a break, I will. However, that said, there are also times when there's a deadline, when there's a project where you have to push through. You just have to, because that is the way it is.
Yep.
But on the other side of that, there is space to take the break. I think one of the areas in which people often fail and get to that place where they're like, well, I'm just going to give myself a get out of jail free card, is because they're not honoring their truth. Meaning, you know what the hell you should and should not be doing.
Yep.
If you need a moment where you're like, I need a break, I need to take a Thursday morning off and stay in bed and chill,
Yeah.
then do it. Normally, I'm up at 6 a.m.
Yep.
This morning, I was up at 7:10 because I woke up and I said, wow, you are obviously exhausted. Go back to sleep, right?
Sure.
And so, because I chose to do that, that's honoring me. That's not taking away, and that's not like letting myself get by, because there is that moment in which you have to ask yourself. And I think, Dave, honestly, the question that pushes me often is, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And
Sure.
if I have to ask myself that question in these moments of breakdown, because I'm measuring, am I being compassionate or am I being too difficult with myself? The answer is the truth. The hard part about the truth is facing honesty within ourselves is the most difficult thing that we will ever do. It's
Right.
really easy to lie to ourselves. Tomorrow I'll do it. Next
Right.
week, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. No, that's probably bullshit. The
Yeah.
truth about it is, if you are willing to sit with your truth and your honesty and it's real, then own it. If
Yep.
you need the space, take the space. But if you're sitting there procrastinating because you're scared that on the backside you might actually be successful, then you need to push yourself.
Yeah, I see more people afraid of success than failure lately because, they're
Totally.
they're afraid of what they could do, and so they kind of throttle it back a little bit. And I don't know if it's an entrepreneurial thing. I don't know. I mean, I saw a statistic that said about 70 some percent of businesses plan on, significant sales growth in 2021, obviously because of probably what happened in 2020. Well, you have companies that are fearful of that. Are we prepared? Is our structure right? Is our mindset right? Is our customer ready? There's all these, oh my gosh, right? Um, and it's interesting because I think about ready, aim, fire. There's a lot of people that get ready, they clean their gun, then they aim, they got that scope dialed in, and then they fire. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, fire, just fire. And then if I
Yeah.
got time, I'll get ready, and if I got even more time, I might aim right, and I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but I think it's interesting, the thinking, the thought process that we have, is really kind of guides how we act. And I just don't want people to be like a how am I going to say this? I don't want people to be a victim of circumstance. I don't want you to think, hey, this happened to me when I was a kid, therefore I can't do this, or I was convicted as a kid, therefore I'll always be in trouble. I'll always have a problem. I'm working with a guy right now, and it's a situation where he had it all. He was married, great job, all this stuff, everything, kids, great. Well, after a bunch of years, his wife pulled the plug on the relationship, and he lost his job. And the negativity and the kind of the hopelessness that's there, it's just so brutal. And in watching one of your videos, you talked about peace. And I thought, man, this is the message that there's an inner peace. There might be chaos around, but there's inner peace. So speak to that inner peace, if you could, Michael, as far as somebody here listening. I know somebody listening does not have that peace. So help us unpack that a little bit, if you could.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about stoicism in moments of chaos. How do you sit with understanding and acknowledging that you don't actually get to have control over everything? And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, especially because, Dave, most of us are perfectionists.
Right.
We're battling this identity of, can we be perfect? And I think about this in twofold. One, perfect doesn't exist. And one of the things that I lead my teams into, and even myself in the way that I create content or put things out or anything that I do in my life, I go for done, not perfect. Get the product out, get the statement out, get the thing on the website, do
Sure.
it. You can control that. You can't control the website going down because of the server in LA when you live in London. You
Sure.
can't control it raining on your wedding day. You can't control your wife leaving you because you can't control people. I'm
Right.
sorry. I hate to break it to you. The worst news you're going to get today is you don't get a say.
Dang it. That's it.
Right. And I
Forget it.
and I think about this often, man.
Yeah.
I can control how I show up. I can control how I eat. I can control what I drink. I control the people in my life and whether or not they get a seat at my table.
Sure.
I can control showing up. That's what you get.
Right.
And the other part of it is, look, anxiety, depression, those things exist. Entrepreneurs kill themselves all the time. Suicidal rates are higher for entrepreneurs than any other industry on planet Earth because it is stressful. I've been an
Yep.
entrepreneur effectively since I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
And when I was 25, I tried to kill myself
Mm.
because I was so fucking stressed out.
Sure.
Here is the thing that you have to understand is you have to be able to put yourself in a position of understanding how you react to circumstance.
Right.
What I didn't understand, what I know now, is that my routine and my self-care and health always comes first.
Right.
My people come first. Business is last. Like, even though I'm successful in business and I have been for a while, which I'm super happy about because I probably pushed myself a little too hard, but it's in my frame of personal responsibility.
Sure.
I look at that and go, okay, great. But it comes last. If my brothers, my partner, my best friends, whoever it is in my life, they're sick, they need help, they need something, I'm canceling this podcast. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Yep.
Because that's the thing. I can control that. I can't control what happens on the other side of it, but I can control that moment. And it's so much about that. When you're up to bat and you're standing there and the pitch is coming, are you going to swing or not?
Yeah.
That's what it is. And then if you miss, here's the important part. If you miss, do it with grace. Do it with kindness, with compassion for yourself. Because I don't know about you, I fail all the time, man. I'm constantly failing. And I love failure. I love it because it's data. It
Sure.
tells me everything I need to know. I mean, I failed $10,000 marketing projects and $1 million businesses. It happens. But when you fail, you look at it and you go, okay, I now have a point of data that says if I try this, then it's not going to work. you have this space to prove hypotheses right or wrong. And in that, the only way you're going to know is through the effort. And so to be caught up in this idea that you don't deserve what's on the backside of your effort, that's nonsense and it's fruitless. If
Sure.
that's the existence that you want to live, then stop doing what you're doing, because clearly it's not in line with who you are as a person.
Yeah. How many people do you know that can honestly say, I love failure? I mean, I
Not a
can't,
lot,
I
man.
got to tell you, full
Not a
disclosure,
lot.
I'm not there. I mean, I understand failure.
It sucks.
I'm able to grasp it. I'm able to learn from it, but I can't say I wake up, Michael, and going, not that you're saying it, but man, I love to fail. I'm not there yet. And so I appreciate that because it's a learner, it's a positive. I have to say selfishly, if I'm walking on thin ice and there's somebody next to me or in front of me and they fall in, I'm like, yes,
Well,
and
I
then
mean,
I'll help
that's
them
a
out. But I'm like, hey, guy, you shouldn't have walked there, right?
look, that's a super valid point, because I think about this all the time, right? And this is just hyperbolic.
Yeah.
The first dude that ever went skydiving for
Yep.
sure died, like
Right.
a hundred
Exactly. Yeah.
percent.
Yep.
But the dude on the ground watching him goes, "Oh no, no, I know you pulled the ripcord earlier. Got it. I'm gonna go do it."
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
I think there's something to be said by learning the lessons of those before you.
Sure. Yep.
And in my own personal life, when I think about and measure failure, it's about, okay, that means I tried. Because you
Right.
can't fail if you don't try. So I'm not scared of failing. I'm not
Yep.
scared of trying. It's just do it.
Right.
Do it and accept the reality.
Yep.
And out of 99 attempts, it's not going to work. But on attempt 100, you're going to go, light bulb, got it.
Right. Yep, absolutely. I mean, I think there's three types of people in the world, right? There's people that watch things happen, there's people that make things happen, and then there's people that don't know what's happening. And so if you're the type that watch things happen, that's okay. Just don't be mad at the people that make things happen. Don't be mad at your neighbor because they're flourishing or somebody at work is just doing fantastic. I mean, they're normally most of them are putting in all the effort that we're talking about here, and I go back to what you said, that word stoic is really a kind of a mystical, creepy, not creepy, but mystical word, right? And what I look at is I was raised to, my parents said, don't just stand there, do something,
Hmm.
you know? And so I've kind of used that in my life and I've always wanted to do stuff. And then now as I'm getting older, I'm kind of modifying that statement to don't just do something, stand there,
Hmm.
you know? And so it's kind of a different perspective, but I got to say, Michael, it's at sometimes it takes every ounce of energy to not go do something, and sometimes I don't want to invest the quiet time because I'm afraid of what I'm going to find. So, I think that one of the first I learned that you need to be open, honest, accountable, and take action. Those were the four things that you talked about on your website. It's hard to be open. So do you have any tips for us to be open? What are we open to? What does that look like? Walk us through that if you could.
Yeah, totally. I start most days with just a couple minutes of quiet meditation that I then transmute into visualization. And the reason that I do that is because if I can see myself in that situation before it happens, it's much easier to step into it,
Okay.
right? I mean,
Gotcha.
I've been on stages with thousands of people in front of me, and I've been on stages with 6 people in front of me. And the thing about it is, when you are in those moments, if you are mentally prepared leading up to it, because you've given yourself the space to entertain the idea that it's plausible, it's much easier to be successful in that moment of reality. I think what happens so often is we get in our way of our own dreams. We close them down immediately. We have these mindsets that say can't, shouldn't, won't, don't. And those words are poison,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the word can't is probably the worst word in the English dictionary, because the moment that you say that you can't, you've automatically put up a wall of improbability. You
Right.
go, oh, no, I don't think I can. I
Yeah.
can't do this. And because you have made that declaration, and if it is true, which I believe it is, that we are the stories that we tell ourselves,
Yeah.
the moment that you say that, it's over. It's
Right.
all over. And some people will call that even a fixed mindset, right? And
Right.
you think about that and you look at that, you have to ask yourself again that question that's always coming back to me: what am I willing to do to have the life that I want to have?
Right.
If that means I need to step into the parameter of, can I be more open? Well, what does that mean? It's going to mean something different for everyone else. I mean, is it more open about your career, about your relationships, about the people that you date, about the kind of car you drive, about the way that you dress? It's about possibility. There are people who exist in the world who are so uncomfortable within their skin, and look, I get it, because at one point, and I didn't recognize this, I didn't have self esteem till I was 27 years old. Zero. Everything that I did was about the hope that someone would like me because of all the things I was pretending to be. You
Gotcha.
like golf? I see you have the Callaway jacket on. Man, I would be like, yo, let's hit the links. I love golf. It's my jam. Dave, I fucking hate golf. It's boring to me. I don't want
So
to
do
play
I.
it.
I just like the shirt. So, that's the funny thing. So,
But but that's
that's
the
cool.
thing, right? It's
Yeah.
like you like it. That's
Yep.
important.
Yep.
I don't like it, but I
Yep.
still would have went with you,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yep.
And the thing is, like, can you tap into this place of the honesty within yourself that says, I am willing to be this person. I'm willing to own who I am. And by owning who I am, that means that I'm willing to shut off the naysayers in my life, the toxic people, the people that don't want me to be successful. And then by doing that, can I be open to the possibility that whatever it is that I want, I can achieve? Because let me tell you this, statistically, based on the zip code I grew up in alone, I should be dead or in jail.
Mm.
My three high school best friends have all been murdered. My
Wow.
family's in prison for life. I
Yeah.
am an orphan in the world. And yet
Sure.
here I am talking to you for no other reason, Dave, other than I believed it to be possible to have the life that I wanted to have. Now,
Right.
of course, I wasn't as clear or intentional about life as I am now. But if I rewind to getting expelled out of high school at 16 years old, it was about, how do I make life happen for me? Selling drugs, stealing cars, running with guns, breaking into houses, hurting people. It was about, how do I figure out how to survive this chaos?
Sure.
And then one day you sit with it and you go, how do I actually elevate my life? How do I actually become the person that I wanted to be? I didn't want to do those things, but by necessity, I had to some extent. Even though it's choice, I take full culpability for every decision I've ever made.
Sure. Yep.
And because of that choice and taking culpability, that means I can open myself up to the idea that if I'm willing to take that same culpability of fault or success as I move forward, then as long as I'm on the trajectory, that's what matters. Because I think about this, I have a very lofty goal in my life, and effectively, it's to put myself out of business, to make Think Unbroken obsolete, to make it so that I don't ever have to talk to you again, Dave. You're an amazing human being, but like, I didn't sign up for this job.
Sure.
And I recognize that on a long enough time frame, that will come to pass.
Sure.
However, I'm for sure going to die before that happens. However, to that, I will continue to move forward in this goal no matter what until the day I die, because I believe it's greater than me. And sometimes this whole thing about being open is sitting and thinking about something that's so far removed from the possibility of the scope of your current reality that
Right.
all you can do is push yourself towards it.
Well, and I think you said something really powerful there, to actually take responsibility for yourself. I mean, I do a lot of sales coaching and sales training, and I talk to a lot of business entrepreneurs, business owners, and I hear more often than not, it's somebody else's fault. It's the weather, it's the government, it's the economy, it's the competition, it's the customer, it's my team, it's the product. I don't care, right? I've heard most of them. And yet I don't see a lot of people looking me in the eye and saying, you know what, this is on me.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
need to fix this. And you can't even start the journey of any kind of self-discovery. You can't, in my opinion, it's hard to start that journey when you're always looking outward to push the blame onto somebody else. I mean, come on, let's be real. The last 6 months has been more one group blaming another group than anything that I've ever seen in my whole life, you know. And it's like, it's just so painful because until somebody says, you know what, we, whatever, I need to do something different. I need to take responsibility for this. I mean, I appreciate that you said that. And it's
Yeah, and,
hard to
and
be open without that,
I agree 100%. Here's the reality. If you are an entrepreneur or a business owner, everything's your fault.
right? Exactly.
Period.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
You have got to come to that place of understanding. Like
Yep.
I think about this in one of my businesses, it's a multi-million dollar e-commerce company.
Okay.
Every time a coupon code doesn't work, it's my fault.
Sure.
Every time there's a customer service issue, it's
Yep.
my fault.
Yep.
Every single time there's a problem with copy on the email newsletter, it's my fault.
Right.
Do I
Yep.
control all those things? No, but it's my team. I
Yep.
brought them on. Where did I fail in hiring? Where did I fail in education? Where
Yep.
did I fail in understanding myself? Right. And then when I think about my life, same thing. Everything's my fault.
Yep.
Period. Period. That's one thing I can control is looking at it and going, all right, show up, do the thing. You fail, you learn, it's your fault, grow. And look, and fault goes both ways. Fault is for success and fault is for failure. Like
Sure.
it is you all the way around. And one of the things I think is really, really important to note is like enough people do not give themselves accolades for the great things that they do.
Absolutely.
Take a moment and sit with it because even the great things are your fault.
Yep. That's so cool. I tell leaders all the time, catch somebody on your team doing something right. You know, it's really easy to say, "Oh my gosh, you're 5 minutes late again." You know, I have clients that just, you know, are so concerned about those little things, and to them, they're big things, which I get. They somehow miss what's really going on, the record sales month, you know, the cohesion of the team, the customer experience has never been higher. I mean, these things are just, you know, such big positive things going on in these companies, you know, and they're looking at 5 minutes on the watch, and I get it. I totally get it. It's like, wow, that's really hard, you know, to be open when somebody's that micromanaging, and it can really damage the team. But I appreciate that you say the same thing. I say that I tell people, all the leaders, that hey, anything going on here in a negative is you, it kind of all comes back to you. You know, again, you might not have written that code that was incorrect, but somehow it got by. And you know what? At the end of the day, you're the one that is responsible for that. So I appreciate that. Which is then the honesty piece, which is that second one. You know, jumping into the third one that you talk about is the accountability. You know, I can say that that's a hard one for me. That's quite frankly one of the reasons that I own my own business and have pretty much my whole life, because I'm not too keen on being accountable to people, you know. So I can see how, you know, entrepreneurs will stumble with this, you know. Open, okay, honest, okay, but you're seeing a lot of brake lights right now with the
Mhm.
accountability piece. So how does that work in your world, Michael?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Here's my thought on it. Twofold, right? Accountability means showing up and doing the things that you said you're going to do, period. No
Yep.
questions asked. Last year was a hard year for so many people.
Sure.
Dave, it was the best year I've ever had. It was the best year of my life because I doubled down on accountability. I
Sure.
looked at my calendar every single day. I did all the things. I showed up every single moment. And it's choice. Here's the thing where people get lost. And let me say this first. I'm with you. I hate being told what to do. I can't work for other people. Not
Right.
my vibe, right?
Yep.
But here's where people get lost. They think accountability is a choice. It's not. You're either going to do it or you're not.
Right.
And the choice is within that. And what you have to take into account is the fact that no one else is going to do it for you. Nobody lives for you, nobody breathes for you, nobody loves for you. It's on you. You have to be willing to step into that understanding, and when you do that, to look at your life and ask yourself, how do I feel about myself when I'm by myself? That's something that one of my mentors, Tom Bilyeu, says. And because it's so true, we know if we're not showing up, if we're not doing the extra sprint, if we're not doing the things that we say that we're going to do. And the hard part about it is we just let ourselves get by too often. I
Yeah.
mean, like, think about it. I didn't get to 350 pounds smoking 2 packs a day by accident. That takes a lot of fucking work. But I'll tell you what happens on the backside of it is I looked at my life and I measured it, and then I go, okay, let's go to work.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's fix it. Let's take accountability.
Sure.
And look, you may need an accountability group. You
Yep.
may need someone to leverage. Good.
Yep.
Go do that. Coming back to what I said earlier about asking for help. But it may
Absolutely.
be this moment where every single day for the rest of your damn life, you need to go look in the mirror and say, I love myself.
Yeah.
And because you're willing to do that, that means that you have to do the hard things. Nobody wants to do the hard things, man. I don't either. I fucking hate getting up at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I hate meditating and journaling and reading and being in rooms full of doctorate PhDs getting continuing education when I didn't even graduate high school on time.
Yep.
And yet being in that position of forcing myself to be the learner, to understand, to grow, to change because of what my vision is. If your vision is true and clear and concise, which might be the first problem that you have, is that you have not put that out on paper,
Sure.
is that you need to do that. Accountability is moving towards that vision every single day until one of two things happens. Well, let's call it three. One, you die. Fine. You get an out. That's your out.
Yeah. There's your get out
Two,
of jail free card. Yep.
exactly. Two, you reach your goal. You go, I did it. Yes,
Yep.
I can go on to the next thing.
Yep.
Three, you wake up one day and you're brutally honest with yourself and you go, this isn't what I want to do with my life anymore. Those are the options. Outside of that, you have to be accountable for moving forward.
Yeah. Wow. And I think if accountability is done right, you should really, it'll come to a spot in your life where you'll want it. I mean, accountability will help you in places. Again, Tiger, just use Tiger Woods, without anybody watching his swing, talking to him about his mindset, investing time in him, he would hit a ceiling. I think if he wouldn't have invested, or his family, or however that worked, if they wouldn't have invested in, accountability people, outside coaches, whatever you want to call them, I think he'd be like most of us. Whoever likes to golf, they would have just stayed at the whatever the kind of amateur level. It's
Yeah.
hard to get into the pro level of anything without these other people and the accountability. So, I totally can see how that works. The last one then is the action. So once you've kind of created this open, honest, situation, accountability is there in your life. Now the rubber meets the road, so to speak. You kind of jump into this action. So is that like the easiest part? Is that the hardest part? Where do you land on that from an action perspective?
It's all hard, Dave. Every single second of every single day of your entire life is hard. That's the way it is. I'm sorry. I wish that weren't the case, but it's true.
Yep.
And in every single moment of every single day, you're making a choice. And on the backside of that choice, whether or not you want to admit it, is action. You're either choosing to act or you're choosing not to act, but either way, an action is taking place. And I don't know about you, but I would much rather be in control of the actions happening in my life than to be floating down the river hoping for my life to happen.
Sure.
Action is about those moments in which you're faced with the reality of deciding the path that you want to take and then taking that path and doing the thing. I mean, is it the hardest? Maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
but eventually you come to this place where it's default, right? In the
Gotcha. Yep.
beginning, is it incredibly difficult? Yes. In the beginning, everything's difficult because you don't know what you're doing. And I would argue, even still, decades into things, you still don't know what you're doing. We're
Sure.
constantly figuring it out. But
Yeah.
the only way you figure it out is by doing the things. And that's where people get caught up because, here's what I think about. If you go and you look at these huge goals, you have to reverse engineer it down to its easiest first step.
Sure.
And people stumble so often because they want to climb Mount Everest without ever even buying hiking boots.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Baby steps
Yeah.
and patience. And I'm going to add a fifth one here, even though you're not, is patience.
Sure.
Everything that you're going to do is going to take forever, period. I've been running this company for 5 years. I'm just now talking to you, Dave. It's taken me 5 years to get to this moment,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And I think about all the things in my life. Like it takes time, but there's constant action, momentum, continuity, doing the thing day in and day out, even though it's tedious, even though it's hard, even though you have to learn all the systems
Sure.
up and down, top to bottom, be involved, run the teams, read the newsletters, go to the meetings, all the things. It's all action. Like, what is it? I love that poster behind you. And I know some people listening can't see it. It says growing on purpose. That's action. You're
Yep.
not going to grow without action on purpose.
Yep, absolutely. And that's actually the name of my book is Growing on Purpose. And it's just because I ran into and still run into, Michael, so many people that are growing by mistake. Ask them how they're growing. Ask them how they
Intention.
did how did you guys get to this spot? They look back, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. I applaud people that are growing by mistake. I also know that it's very hard to walk that path again. If you want to grow by mistake next year, it's going to be a different path. I like in the snow. I'm in Milwaukee, so it's always snowing here. But you know what? It's way easier to walk a path that's already been walked, and so whether it's you've done it before, this is the process, the path, let's do it again, so I appreciate that patience piece as well. So as we
Yeah,
start
and
to come
Dave,
in, oh, go ahead.
and can I just say this? I think,
Absolutely.
and I'm in agreement with you, right? Growing by mistake is a huge part of the journey. That's
Yep.
just naturally what it is, right?
Yep.
Because we don't know everything, but that will plateau. And then what are you going to do? And
Correct.
having a game plan, having clarity and intention is what's going to get you to the next level.
Absolutely. Yep. Great point. So as we start to come in for landing, I wanted to kind of talk about your Unbroken podcast. Tell me a little bit about, what that is. What topics you guys talk about. I love to cross promote podcasts. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started the Michael Unbroken podcast as a self-help podcast
Okay.
because there used to be a time, once upon a time, where I would look at self-help and I'd be like, that's a joke. Who does that? Who goes to these seminars and jumps up and down and does these things?
Yep.
And what I recognized about that, Dave, was the reason I judged it is it wasn't that I didn't understand it. It was that I was afraid that I might discover something about
Yep.
myself. And now I do it all the time. Like it's just I still don't jump up and down. You will never see me jumping up and down. Not my vibe, not my thing. But I'm going to go there to learn, and that's what the
Sure.
Michael Unbroken podcast is. And it's twofold. It's either me on a topic because I do coach, where I have a question that one of my clients has asked me or someone's asked, and
Yep.
then I dive into it for 15, 20 minutes. And then the other episodes is when I bring in an expert, doctors, physicians,
Okay.
educators, people who understand at
Gotcha.
scale something that I don't,
That's
right?
awesome.
Because I'm always trying to, if we can understand at least one thing different about ourselves every single day, we continue to grow. And that's what the Michael Unbroken podcast is about, is it's not only about understanding the impact of trauma, but it's understanding about how do you turn the corner? How do you get out of the vortex? How do you get out of the darkness and then ultimately become the hero of your own story?
Yeah, that's so true. And I think there's a lot of, I'm my next book where I'm working on now is on business blind spots. And because there's so many of them and you don't know what you don't know. And so I see people, that like self-help. Some people are so oblivious it's a blind spot to them. They just don't see it. But then there's the people, like you said at the beginning, they're kind of, you're rebelling it, you see it and you're like, no, I am not doing that. So if you're listening and it's a blind spot for you, then hey, welcome, because this will hopefully be revealing to you. If you're resisting this, if you've been resisting the whole time, well, quite frankly, you wouldn't even still be listening if you were resisting this the whole time, right? But,
Mhm.
I mean, Michael's got a ton of awesome stuff, here, and we've just scratched the surface of this. And so as we land this plane today, two more questions for you. One is, what would Michael Anthony's tip of the week be for the people listening?
Ooh, I love that question. I think this feels universal, even though it's very specific. I'll explain why. I always say, though trauma may be our foundation, it's not our future. And I believe that's universal because your circumstance to this moment do not have to be your circumstances in your future.
Awesome. Wow, thank you. Yeah, I saw that on your website and I was hoping that you'd touch on that because that's again, when 7 out of 10 people have some kind of trauma, and that's probably even a low number, but let's just use it because that's, probably a study somewhere. And, 7 out of 10 people have a trauma. And what do you do with that? And we started at the beginning, and I said, I would just brush it under the, it was a big mound in the living room under the rug. It was like, what's that? It's like, oh, a bunch of trauma, a bunch of stuff that no one wants to talk about in the family. Some people might call it the elephant in the room, whatever, but I appreciate that you share that. The last question that I have is, what's one thing that most people listening probably don't know about you, that you feel comfortable sharing, Michael?
Yeah. That's actually tough because when I decided to do this, like for real, step into Think Unbroken a few years ago, I said everything's on the table.
Sure.
I mean, you could literally find out everything about my life. I will say that here's one that I don't know that I've ever shared.
Oh, cool.
Um, I actually love 80s hair metal. Motley Crue is one of my favorite bands of all time.
Who is
And
it?
like
Say
when
it again.
yeah, Motley Crue,
Oh, Motley Crue.
like
Okay.
yeah, like
Nice.
when I'm rocking and rolling, I like when I was a kid, I wanted to be Tommy Lee so bad. And so now I think about my life as being a rock star just in a little bit of a different circumstance.
Sure. Wow, that's so cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Well, this time has flown by. I appreciate you hanging out with us. For anyone listening that, has some questions about this, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Michael, if they want to maybe explore a little bit more with you? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. The Michael Unbroken podcast is literally everywhere.
Okay.
My book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, is on Amazon. It's on all the bookstores. If you can't afford it, that's not an excuse because it's in your library. Go get it for free. And then if you're interested in coaching, and I coach people from entrepreneurs to celebrities and athletes to moms and dads and everyone in between, because like you said, 7 out of 10 people are impacted by this. You are not alone.
Yeah.
And that information is on my website at thinkunbroken.com.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you take such a compassionate stance in this, and I have to say, all those tattoos on your arms, coming from a guy that doesn't have any tattoos, I was intimidated. I'm like, crap, what's he gonna, It's a good thing we're on Zoom because otherwise, I'm like, this would even be more intimidating. But your compassion, the way that you approach this delicate topic, I appreciate and I thank you for opening up our eyes to this. And again, if you're listening and something resonated, just pick up the phone and call, jump on his website, do something. Don't live with this. If it's that bad, there's hope. There's peace. We talked about that. We talked about some ways to work through this. And that's why this podcast is here. That's why I'm here. That's why Michael's here. We love to come alongside people as coaches, and we love to watch them, be able, like he said, he'd love nothing more than to train himself out of a job. I'd love nothing more than for there not to be a business or a business owner or a entrepreneur that had any need for a sales coach, a business coach. That would be awesome. I'd go do, I'll be happy to be a cart boy at Walmart. I'm fine with that. And so again, we avail these opportunities to you every week. This one is so unique that if it tugged at you, you know what? Do something about it. And again, thank you so much, Michael, for hanging out with us. And hopefully, once we open up, I'd love to share a stage with you. Love to learn even more from you. So I'm going to continue to be on my journey here. And thank you for coming alongside me today and our listeners and helping us out.
Thank you, Dave. It means the world to me, man. This great questions, great interview. Thank you, my friend.
Take care.